Hey guys, today I'll go over how you can shoot and edit cinematic photos to go from this to this. And don't forget to check out the timestamps below if you want to get right into it. So with that, let's get into it. Now, what do I mean by cinematic? Well, there's obviously not just one cinematic look. There's many kinds out there. There's the bright and poppy. But for this video, I'm going to talk about more of the moody side of things. And the simple tips that I'm going to describe in this video, obviously you can do that to any photo, but you'll get the best results if you start with a good base. So that means starting with a good photo. Here are some shooting tips on how to get the best results. First of all, the general thing is we're going to want low contrast images. Take a look at your lighting. What are you shooting? So we're going to try to avoid things like bright sunny days, direct sunlight, and we're going to go more towards the overcast, the cloudy days. Maybe if it is bright and sunny, if you can get into the shade. Pre-dawn before the sun rises or even after the sun has set, you're going to get a very soft lighting. If you're going to add artificial lighting, try to make it seem as natural as possible. For example, at a desk like this, it's totally normal to see a lamp like this, right? However, it'll be totally weird if for example, you had like this weird underlighting, you know? It might give that cool effect, but it's just unnatural. Why would this be down here? For the most part, if you want to get good results editing this way, shoot in natural light. What I'm trying to say is, if you're going to add artificial lighting, make sure you do it in a way that mimics real life. Another tip for shooting, if you're going to have people in your frame, moody tends to correlate with sadness or somberness, melancholy, while brightness tends to be more happy, smiley, excitement, or uppity feelings. So if you're going to have somebody smiling in your photo or kind of more cheery, and then you go ahead and edit in a more moody, cinematic, dark way, it just kind of, there's a little discord, so the brain goes a little, what's going on? Sometimes it's more overt, sometimes it's more subtle. Not in all cases, but just keep that in mind. And then the fourth tip would be shoot with some kind of storytelling element to it. If it's going to be tighter on the face and there's not much background element to it, then try to convey some sort of emotion that makes the viewer go, what are they looking at or what are they feeling? Or you can go the other way and go wider and shoot more environmental. That's the style that I tend to like. I like to wander around the frame. I remember when I was younger, I remember looking at picture books, and I liked the picture books that just had like all this stuff going on where you can kind of look around and see different stories playing out. Obviously, you're not going to go that complicated with a photo, but if you're going to have like multiple people, 2, 3, or 4 people, just having the depth of supplemental stories, side stories, I think it's kind of cool. Enough about shooting. Let's take a look at the editing. Now, I'll show you in Lightroom on how I edit this way, but you can use other programs. I'll talk about more of the principles. What am I doing to get these kinds of results? All right, so let's look at these images here. For example, if you look at all 4 at the same time, kind of at a glance, you'll notice a greenish tint to it. It's very moody, it's dark, and you can kind of tell that it all belongs in the same set. So here are the simple steps that I do to make it dark and moody and cinematic like this. So you can tell by the reflection in the window here that the sun is already set. It's very soft lighting, and so it's going to work really nicely with this image. And here is the before of how it looked straight out of camera. You know, the camera compensates to make it a very normal, more bright exposure. So here's the before, here's the after. So let's start from scratch and try to build that look. You're going to want to crop in a way that looks like a movie. So typically those are 239 by 1, but that's going to be a little bit too much letterbox. You can get really addicted to ultra wide cropping, but unfortunately most of us are looking through Facebook or Instagram. So I find that the 2x1 is a good compromise between the 239 and the 16:9. And so already you can tell it looks very cinematic. That's step 1, very easy. Step 2, exposure. Now this is the second step that I would do to get the most immediate result, is bring the exposure down. Now normally, this is a good exposure when I would do, I guess, more traditional editing, and then I would add like a curve to add some contrast, right? But with cinematic images, you're gonna bring the exposure down. After the crop, this is looking even more cinematic, right? So with this style of editing, what we're gonna do is plot 3 points here in the highlights, midtones, and shadows. And then generally speaking, we're gonna protect the highlight. Okay, so we're gonna do most of the contrasting through the shadows and the midtones here. So, okay, here's a side rant. Lightroom, this is so annoying. If there's a point here on the curve, I want to grab this point if I'm anywhere near this. I don't want a second point here. I'm just trying to grab the point, and I don't want another point this close. I don't need that much fine tuning. It's so annoying. Please reduce the sensitivity. I'm just trying to grab this point and adjust it. I don't want to create another point right next to it. That's just, stop it, please. Please update Lightroom, please. Okay, anyway, let's start over. So like I said, we're gonna plot 3 points in the highlights, midtones, and shadows. We're gonna protect the highlight, and then we're gonna do all of our contrasting through the shadows and midtones. So we can you can start to see already that you're getting the contrast adjustments that you need while still retaining the dark and moody feel to it. And you can also see by the exposure here and also up here, most of the data is in the midtone, a little bit above the midtone to the shadow area, right? So the highlights, it's almost nothing. It's basically nothing here, right? So that's kind of how you get the cinematic look, is if most of your data is in the darker areas. And so that's why when you adjust these 2 points in the curve, that's why you're getting the contrast that you're looking for. And here, since you're protecting the highlight, there's really nothing to protect. There's no data there. But sometimes you'll have data there, so that's why we put that point there. And you don't want to get too contrasty. We're starting with very low contrast lighting as a base, so you don't want to add too much contrast here. Then it just kind of looks muddy and dark, and you get just no detail in the super darks. So with this curve, you're going to make subtle movements and not make it too much. Here's what it looked before the curve. And then another thing that you could do with the curve here is take the black point and kind of give that faded look. So just bring it up a little. That's how you get that faded look. But you can always overdo things. That's one thing that as I first learned Photoshop, was I would learn a new skill and then I would kind of end up overdoing it. For example, when I first learned how to sharpen photos, I just went crazy with the sharpening. Over time, you start to realize, okay, that's a little bit too much, and you start to dial back on your edits. I've learned that my style, subtle movements, subtle adjustments, subtle edits kind of gives you what at least the look that I'm looking for. And then step 3, you're going to start to fine tune after all the big chunky steps. So first step was crop, second step was bring the exposure down, and then the third step we're going to start to fine tune. One of the things that I almost always do with my images is desaturate. As a starting point, I would do minus 10% desaturated. And here I'm starting to like it, but let's go for a little bit more, maybe around there. And then bring back a little bit of the skin tone by upping the vibrance a little. Yeah, right about there. Also, I'll bring up the clarity a little bit. just to give it a little bit more punch. And overall, it's still looking a little bit darker in the faces. So let's kind of bring up the highlights a little bit. And also, you know, you could bring up the shadow a little bit. These are all the subtle tweaks that you can kind of adjust. These are more specifically toward each image. Not all images are going to respond the same. Depending on your actual image that you're working on, these sliders will be different. And then step 4, what are we on 4 now? Let's play with the white balance a little. So that'll warm up the skin a little bit more. And then remember how I was saying earlier, I like a little bit of the greenish tones. And so with the tint, let's bring a little bit of the green in. About there. And then the final touch to polish it off or unpolish would be to add grain. So let's add some grain. Okay. And you don't have to recreate these steps every time you do an image. So in the same set, you can just basically either create a preset for yourself, save all these settings as a preset, or for quick editing, you can just copy Command-Shift-C for Mac, and then go to a different one and paste. So here's another image. Here's how I edited it previously. And so it's nice and dark and moody. And here's the original straight out of camera, and don't mind my Astrolight there. And then we're just gonna paste the settings from the previous image that we did. And then of course, just edit the crop, adjust the crop. Okay, yeah, I mean, that looks good already, right? So there you go, that's easy enough. And then let's go see how it looks on a different one. So here's another image that I edited from the same set, and here's straight out of camera. And let's paste the settings and adjust the crop. And already I can tell that my OCD, the angles are not parallel. The beams here are leaning to the right, and then this is straight. So you can try to adjust it. And you can see that it's just starting to kind of W out. The middle one's straight, and then this one leans to the right, and this leans to the left. And so you can kind of fix that in Transform Vertical. Let's go. Let's try there, and then Constrain Crop to get rid of that. And that's feeling better. You can spend all day with this. But yeah, this looks pretty good. The only other thing that I might do here is this red is really distracting. So you can either go to brush and kind of take away that red, or you can, so you don't really see other reds in the frame. So you could just kind of take the red slider down. There you go. Get it subtle. All right, so I hope that helped. This is kind of the opposite of that bright and poppy trendy photos that you might see out there. I got into this look because I've been on quite a few film sets shooting behind the scenes, and just observing how they always had this different look to it than what I would normally get out of my DSLR or digital camera. And so I've been used to kind of editing the normal way, the traditional way, or the more poppy colory way, the contrasty way. But I've always noticed how they just had this cool, subtle look to it. And just watching movies as well, I just love that moody, cinematic, very soft feel to the way they make movies. I started experimenting and just trying to figure out how I can make my images look more like movies. And so I hope this kind of helps. And I know this was in Lightroom, but you could use whatever program software you have to apply those same principles. First, the crop will do wonders. The second is just basically bring the exposure down. And then from there, adjust the shadows and the contrast from there in a subtle way. And then, of course, if you're on mobile, some of the mobile apps, you can do these adjustments, or you could just slap a filter on, and do it the easy way. Anyway, if you found this video informative, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button and hit subscribe for more videos on photography and the business of photography. Till next time, see ya.